Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hey, welcome to the Castle of Horror podcast, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week, we're closing out the Evil Dead Retrospective, and we're looking at Evil Dead 2013. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So there's fair warning, there's spoilers ahead. I'm Tony Salvaggio, subbing in for Jason. I'm in Austin, and I am the lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, well as the bassist, as well as the co-author, along with Jason, of the manga-style comic Psycom and the steampunk adventure Clockworks from Humanoids. Also in Austin is Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man from Monsterverse Comics. Say hey, Drew.
Hey, everybody.
We've also got Max Meehan, screenwriter, filmmaker, and the owner of the independent pro wrestling company Inspire Pro. Say hey, Max.
Hey, how you doing?
And once again, in Los Angeles, we have special guest Adam Foshko, story and creative consultant for the acclaimed Call of Duty series, as well as screenwriter and creative producer for the wildly successful Skylander series. Say hey.
How's it going?
Awesome. So the gang's all here, and we're ready to talk about the Evil Dead 2013. It's a remake, pretty much remake / alternate universe / sequel. Could be any of those. The jury is out of the Evil Dead franchise. Not directed by Sam Raimi. Does not have Bruce Campbell. Sort of doesn't have him. If you watch long enough after the credits. Again, spoilers ahead. And is definitely an updated version with a lot more budget, but I'm not sure if I think that it has a lot of the same heart. So let's just get into it. Let's see. Let's do first impressions. We'll start with Drew, Adam, Max, and then I'll go.
Alrighty. Well, I was just saying before we started to record this, I really worked myself up into like a venomous, like almost like you think the Tasmanian devil gets when I was just spinning around with rage when I first heard about this movie, and I literally avoided seeing it until I was forced by another friend of mine, Ivan, who I've mentioned a few times on the show, who is a big movie buff, and he's somebody whose opinion I respect. He basically made an irresistible deal to me that he would make me. He has a smoker, and I had a wild pig that I had recently butchered, and he said he would smoke the entire pig if I would watch this movie. So
that sounds pretty horror movie.
It's fair. It's a fair trade by any man's standards. And I watched it. It does have a lot of stuff that annoys the hell out of me. Visually, it reminds me a lot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake and this sort of look that they tend to do when Hollywood remakes a sort of non-Hollywood low-budget movie where they seem to like amp up all the saturation and everything. And I cannot stand that look. I hate the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. I think that is one of the worst movies ever made. I can't even get into how much I hate that movie. It could be a podcast into itself. This movie, however, I don't love it. I keep saying I feel like I'm going to be playing devil's advocate a lot because I don't love this movie. But I do find it entertaining enough. Like I would, if I were to use the letter grading, I would give it a B- or maybe a C+. It's not perfect, but I've now seen it 3 times. It's diverting enough. I think Tony earlier on Facebook called it a kind of a WB version of Evil Dead, and I think that's actually kind of an appropriate description of it. So. If I can give like a half-hearted thumbs up to Hemlock Grove 2 weeks in a row, I guess I can give a half-hearted thumbs up to this, even though especially now, having watched all three of the original films, I do feel like the lack of Raimi really sort of hammers home how generic this material could be without the Raimi touch. All right, take it away.
Yeah, I think that is a pretty accurate assessment. I had not seen this picture at all in the theaters, and even though I wasn't worked up into a frantic, angry lather over its production release, I was a little skeptical, but it was just skepticism that kept me out of the theater and other interests and things like that. I figured I would catch it probably eventually. Well, I finally caught it, and I want to give it back because, if the Army of Darkness represented, full-on Raimi cranked up to 11 in the mix, where it's more Raimi and less, of the qualities that sort of made Evil Dead, like in Evil Dead 2, really stand out, and we crank the humor and everything else. This is the polar opposite of that. With all of the Raimi, all of the saturation, turned down to sub-zero. I mean, to the point that you really could have almost shot it in black and white. And if you judge it on the merits of it just being a picture, it's fine. When you say, CW, a CW version of Evil Dead, it's sort of like, I don't know, a Gilmore Girls version of it, and that really worries me to kind of even get that analogy going in my head. But it is, standing on its own merit, it's probably okay, but there's really nothing in it that really strikes me as being Evil Dead-ish. Yes, they're evil. Yes, they're dead. Yes, some of the tropes are there. A lot of the key elements, like there is a cellar. There's a chainsaw. I mean, there are things like that. But in general, it's lacking irony. It's lacking humor. It's lacking the European down ending, which, we talked about famously a couple times. It's not really an Evil Dead picture for me. And because of it, I don't like it. It might be fine on its own, but not an Evil Dead movie.
Fair enough.
I guess I'm up next. I think this movie is a piece of dog shit on wheels for the same reason that many films that are coming out today are bad. I am not really a fan of a lot of American contemporary horror films because I really honestly feel like they are the most pandering films that are made for audiences today. And let's face it, most horror films that are made are kind of they're shooting for the PG-13 audience. It's very clear that they saw the original Evil Dead and they borrow beats from both Part 1 and Part 2. But the whole point of a remake is to do something kind of fresh with it. And they fail. They kind of fail. They don't even kind of fail. They totally fail at it. When Raimi and Campbell talked about wanting to remake Evil Dead, prior to this, they said that there were a lot of things that they weren't able to do when they made it originally, that they were really constrained by their budget. And I really don't feel like this movie achieves anything special with the material. But beyond that, it doesn't feel like an Evil Dead film. It feels like a weird mashup of The Exorcist and The Ring. And also just everything feels very forced. Everything is just so ham-fisted. The production design is hideous. The music cues force you to kind of get into it, sort of. It really tries way too hard, and the actors are just miserable. You guys say CW, I say Degrassi caliber. This stuff is just I can't. And I like Degrassi, but I don't want Degrassi in my Evil Dead. That's me. Go for it.
This is the second time I've watched it, and I liked it even less the second time. I think that, outside, I think it's joyless in a lot of ways. I think while it's somebody trying to I'm not going to be Raimi. And I'll respect that. Aping Raimi is a bad idea. You're not going to do that.
Except they do ape Raimi.
Sort of.
There's some decidedly Raimi camera choices in this.
Well, sort of. But they've made it this part is ultra real. They've tried to make everything real. And that feels like it's okay when Ash like takes his arm off in Evil Dead 2, because you're like, and it has that kind of almost like tongue-in-cheek irony. When somebody takes their arm off here, it's just grody, and you're like, that person would go into shock because they've made it.
I want
to. You can't take yourself out of it the same way because they make it a point like, we're out here. We're not just out here in the vacation. We're out here to help our friend, my sister who's been a druggie. And I think the characters are just super annoying. I hate all of them.
The heroin thing is what makes me call it. The heroin thing is what makes me call it Two Steps Away from being a Rob Zombie movie. It's just so eye-rollingly like, ugh, really? That's what you had to come up with?
So all the
scenario?
Like, we're on vacation.
That's
cool.
That's one of the few beats about, like, I'll get into what I don't like about it when we dive deep into it.
Let's I guess that's my first impression. That's not a big fan. But to start out, we do have, like the other Evil Dead movies. Well, we'll start getting into it. You do have a group of people who have come out to a cabin, where, of course, we have a new scene where there's a demon, and they end up like there's rednecks and there's witches. There's like a B team from Pumpkinhead down in the basement. And the dad, who's evidently recorded everything.
Can I tell you that the opening scene is my favorite part of the whole picture? Because I really didn't expect it. And I was like, oh, wait. And then it kind of started with a bang, and I went, okay. And then it didn't work for me after that, but that may have been my favorite scene.
Well, they have the dad who's like...
I like that scene too, but it troubles me throughout the rest of the movie is that why did those people who so obviously knew that was an evil book just leave it lying there? Like that.
I don't disagree. Yeah.
Well, they did wrap it up with barbed wire as if to say, "Hey, I'm going to leave this here wrapped in barbed wire." So either they were really
bury the damn thing. Bury the damn thing.
Or for some reason demons can't open up barbed wire in plastic wrap. One of the two. That's just one of the things that doesn't make a lot of sense. So you have a bunch of friends and a really crappy nurse who I never enter into care with her, who's supposed to be like helping, I guess with DTs and such, who's been a friend of theirs for a while. So a bunch of CW people, very pretty people, go into the woods, not for a vacation this time, but for a much more dire and eventually sinister purpose. So, I don't know. So let's start there.
I'm also really, really troubled by just the whole notion of, they are running this analog of demon possession and, heroin addiction and, trying to quit cold turkey, and these people who are trying just so hard to, get us engaged emotionally with them, and on this, it's so fun and loaded that it feels. I think you said it, Max. It's really, it feels obvious, and
also.
By the way, the whole parallel between the parallel between demonic possession and the DT thing, there's a lot of humor in there, and yet they completely gloss over it. My main problem with this is what makes me hate horror films is when characters do really stupid shit, and characters do really stupid shit all throughout this movie. The best horror films, I think, are the films where the characters are kind of, we propose that they live in a world where there are horror films. Not necessarily that they reference horror films all the time, but man, if I find a book that's wrapped in barbed wire, I'm not going to clip it open and start reading out of it and quoting dead languages. It's just seems kind of like a bad idea to me just because I have seen so many horror films.
Well, also, he not only does that, but he's smart enough to recognize, this is another thing that I had a problem with. He's smart enough to go, dude, this isn't voodoo, this is really dangerous. And then he subsequently, and the other thing that made it joyless too is just, there's just like there's not a lot of like cursing in the first two, and I'm no prude about that. But the tone of where everything's like, by the way, this is super harsh. It's, you know, motherfucker this, and, you know.
It feels
like
the demonic possession really feels like Reagan. Like it feels like Reagan from The Exorcist. Like you know, go back to your really hell, you know.
You know, I definitely noticed that more this time. You know, when I visited it this time, that there is like a very Exorcist vibe to it. In fact, I would say in a lot of respects, the way they handle the possession stuff does seem much more Exorcist. I mean, you know, the other movies, the people once they get possessed, they actually look much more like monsters. Whereas this, they look more like the kind of fucked up
like
power of people.
There's so much weird Ring-influenced imagery in this movie. Even the final demonic character is just very, very Ring-esque. It's weird because they managed to actually pick up a lot of the beats and the scenarios from the original film and somehow defang them. Like the suggested tree rape doesn't come near being as disturbing as the original one somehow, which is really remarkable. I don't know how you make something like that.
I think it's because the way, first of all, they have the root come out of a apparition's mouth instead of it actually coming from the ground, and that kind of, even though they are trying to be quote unquote grittier and realer with this, that somehow makes it seem a little. You know, a little, like I said, I said this on Facebook earlier. It's more of like a generic spook show, more like you know, the Raimi touch really elevates the stuff from just being kind of a generic ghost story. And I think this has much more of like a, you know, except for the fact that it's so violent, you know, it has almost a made-for-TV kind of quality to it.
I agree. It's like it does feel very made for TV, but with a really, like, you know, gritty for gritty's sake edge. Also, they kind of made
it looks a lot like certain episodes of Supernatural.
Yeah, the tree rape thing, they also kind of made like, it's like an anime tentacle, like hentai tentacle thing. So like, haha. And, you know, this made me wonder, one of the things I was thinking about is this, because I've seen so many of these movies lately that have this really kind of cynical, they're gorier. You know, I don't know if they're much gorier than some of the 70s stuff I've seen at like something at Weird Wednesday or something like that. But I just wonder, is this where we're at? Like, you know, is this what American horror is? This kind of desaturated, gritty for gritty's sake, you know, but with pretty actors in it. Like, is this where we're at? I wonder.
But it's
and
not
if
even
that's
really
it, man, I don't know. It's
not even close to being gritty. Yeah, gory, but it's like it still feels really, really neutered. I feel like I said this to you earlier. I feel like people really wanted to love this movie, especially because Raimi and Campbell kind of, you know, they produced it. People are so eager to want to love something again. And so people were really, really, like, adamant that I was supposed to, or I had to love this movie because Raimi and Campbell had some sort of involvement. And I think people just want to love something. And, you know,
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, except that I do find it passively diverting, and I really, like, I did not give a shit that Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell were involved with it. I wanted to hate this movie like I wanted to hate. I can't recall wanting to hate a movie like I wanted to hate this movie. Like, when I remember seeing the trailers and, like, you know, I don't normally post a lot of static on Facebook, but I remember posting, like, you know, screw this movie, this doesn't look like Evil Dead, this is bull crap, you know, and I came around, you know, it's, you know, maybe it's because my expectations were so low, I don't know, but it is entertaining in its way. Like, I'm not saying it's the savior of horror cinema the way some people are. It's not. It's an okay movie. You know, it's okay. I've seen a lot of much, much, much worse movies. I mean, if you're going to stack it up against the original three. Like, it doesn't have – those movies have a very, very much a lot of personality. This movie, you know, I think if I were to hang one major insult around its neck is that I feel like it feels very generic.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
I agree with you.
That's it.
The thing that really gets me about it is that it very much feels like a weird stew of a bunch of other shit. Whereas I think that if this film didn't have, it depends on the legacy that Raimi and Campbell forged. It very much depends on that to exist, because without it, it's a very dry, crappy movie. And you know what really made the Evil Dead films stand out is that they had a flavor of their own. They forged their own personality. They're very much individual, and that's why they kind of rose to the top. I mean, there were so many genre films coming out during that period, but the Evil Dead films persisted and really took root and you know, grew into popularity. The only thing it has going for it is saying that, well, it's an Evil Dead remake. It's a remake. That's about it. I think if it had the Evil Dead name removed from it, I don't think we'd be talking about it even, obviously, but it's just another horror film to me that comes. It's the same thing, same dull characters that barely even matter until they get hacked up. That weird coloring that you knocked, which, God, thank you for that. It's just, it has no personality of its own. It does nothing to justify its existence, in my opinion.
You know, I'm not even anti-remake, strictly speaking. I'm anti, like, you know, when the Nightmare on Elm Street remake came out, you know, I wasn't pissed off that they were doing it. I was pissed off when I saw it, and I didn't really feel like that they didn't really do anything interesting with it when you could have.
You know, I think this is the same thing. Like the RoboCop remake. There's actually some good, there's some good bits in the RoboCop remake. But the more I watched it, the more I was kind of like, this didn't have, like, I would have enjoyed this. And I know that, you know, part of it's nostalgia. But when you're making a movie and you're saying, we have to call this Evil Dead, we have to call this RoboCop, we have to call this Nightmare on Elm Street, you're hoping that some of the fans who are familiar with it are coming back. Like, you've got to be, because you're capitalizing on the name. So when you name it that, and then you get something that's like so tone deaf as to what made this franchise what it is. And I don't even think RoboCop was as tone deaf in a way, but it had that, like, at the end I was like, wow, I would have liked it more if I wasn't comparing it in my head, because that's what you do, you know. And so this is just another movie where, you know, you're like, wow, I don't like any of these people. I kind of like the people, even in one where they're kind of even goofier and, like, maybe not as likable. Like, I kind of like them. I didn't like anybody in this movie, and the nurse, like, you know, my mom teaches A&P, and she teaches a lot of nursing students, and I know a lot of nurses, and this girl who's like, they're like, hey, we should take her into the hospital. She's like, she's getting the same care here. You're like, no, there's like a whole setup in a hospital that is different than a grungy cabin. Like, she is not getting the same care. It fires everybody listening to her at that point. Like, all of that stuff, just that crap drove me nuts. I don't even know. Like, there's just a bunch of bits like that.
If you're just remaking a film too, I think to just put Guitar Hero and cell phones in it, you basically set yourself up for failure. I can name a remake that I actually really love. There's a movie that I love even more than the original. I love the Hills Have Eyes remake more than I love the original Hills Have Eyes, and it's mainly because they did some really interesting stuff with the mythology of the characters out in the desert, like tying it into A-bomb testing and stuff. It made it much more colorful. Granted, there's some stuff that's not as biting and they pull a lot of punches, but I feel like as a story, it flows better and it has genuine tension to it.
You know, it does seem like they were trying to keep from stepping on the original's toes, and they were, you know, by the sheer fact that there is no Ash character, which I feel I go back and forth on. In some ways, I think that was a smart decision because it would just, you don't have Bruce Campbell, but at the same time, like, I think what every real fan of the original trilogy wanted to see was more Ash. So they were kind of shooting themselves in the foot. And there's even that brief bit, which is the point where she's the most likable in the entire movie, where at the end where Mia basically becomes a female Ash. And that's maybe only the last 5 minutes. Like, that doesn't last that long.
Hey, somebody's got some crazy mic action going on. Sorry. I don't know who it is. Sorry to interrupt, but if you could...
I myself was sitting by a roaring fire in Wyoming, so I keep hearing that, though.
Yeah. Anyway.
There it is. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
whatever.
I got nothing.
Hey,
I'm sitting by a roaring lion.
Okay.
That's not the fire. That's I don't know what that is.
That's just a roaring lion next to me. It's quiet where I am. Do you hear it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Darren in the chat room said it's a deadite. So evidently the Evil Dead are roaring towards us since we didn't like this movie. Evidently that's what's happening. He also said, he did like the dog, which actually I think may be the only sympathetic character in the movie. And I will agree with that.
True.
Grandpa is a great name for a dog, by the way.
I really wish they had gone like Poltergeist 3 with this and just had it take place in a skyscraper and they find the book in the basement or something stupid like that. If they were going to do something, I wish, if you're going to deviate from convention or do something really different, just fucking go for broke, man. Put it on Club Med. Evil Dead on Club Med, I'd watch that.
Evil Med.
Evil Dead
Evil Med would be great, yeah.
Or, yeah, if you're going to get, the CW cast of whatever of your choosing, then put them in the CW area. That would have worked. Like, I mean, if it's going to be so tonally different, then screw it. Why even have them go into a cabin?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, they didn't even need the cabin setting. That's another thing. If you're going to remake it, so long as you have like the bare bones structure of the story, like group finds book, group unleashes demons from evil tone, group gets picked off, you could put that in virtually any setting. It didn't need to be in a cabin. If you're going to go to the trouble of actually getting rid of, like, say, the principal hero of the story, completely reinvent it, completely remake it, and just do something really unique with it.
So on that, there's a decent amount of, let's talk about the gore a little bit here. You have a decent amount of practical effects, but there's still a pretty good mix of CG. For me, one thing that separates this, and it's in that same kind of tonally different, when Ash cuts off his arm in, say, Evil Dead 2, it's done with, like, there's some humor, and there was a humorous bit where the, hands going. To me, every time something like somebody pulling their arm off or chopping their arm off or getting scalded or whatever, like, since you've decided to make this super realistic, to me it starts to not be as effective. Or, these people would go into shock almost immediately. Like, I had a hard time separating look how ultra real it is. But you've got people like losing limbs and getting shot with nail guns and like all this terrible crap, like constantly. And then, if they're demons, fine. But most of them, when this happens, they aren't demons at that point, And to me, that also was like really hard for me to suspend my disbelief because it didn't have that kind of pressure valve of irony and like slight dark humor.
Right. What
do you guys think?
Well, the thing with the Max, you go first because I have a rant about her sawing her arm off. People
really want to defend this film, and one of the main like arteries of their defense is usually the practical effect argument, and it's like, there are some practical effects in this, but there is way much CGI going on, and the CGI they use is for stuff that they could have easily gone practical with. That's another thing that makes me kind of point out that people are just really eager to just want to like something. It's to me, this film and all the excuses that people make for it is the epitome of people just settling for stuff. They're just settling. It's good. It's better than everything else out there, which is still a pretty low bar. But yeah, go ahead. Is that Drew?
Yeah,
Drew.
Okay. I've worked in the meat industry almost my entire adult life. I was a butcher for 8 years. I know all kinds of cutlery, cutting equipment, and I certainly know what an electric knife can do. And there's no possible way home. The sort of electric knife you can buy for a turkey on Thanksgiving can cut through bone. That bothers me so fucking much.
No, it does not. That's the whole, I've used an electric knife more than a few times. Like, that's one of those where I'm like, oh, that would be terrible. Like, you would go into shock so quick because that's a really, electric knife, not good, you know? Like, that's not cool. Yeah.
You know, I got to tell you, I mean, the thing is, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, I saw the arm severing, you know, with the electric knife and was kind of going, that's not going to do anything. And then I thought, and even though I was disturbed by it also as much as, you know, the needle in the eye socket and it wouldn't calmly pull it. There are all these things that seemed ultra real, ultra, you know, like they were practical style effects meant to really kind of make me feel like I was in it. It was really gritty and, you know, and more than sort of guffawing at the failure of the ultra realism, it really was, I think we said it earlier in a couple different ways. It was the lack of irony, it was the lack of humor, it was the lack of all this stuff. I mean, even if they had taken some big swings and said, you know what, we're going to make this ultra real, and then we're going to make it just as ultra ironic and ultra, you know, stick some humor in there too somehow, and then, you know, now that would be, I would be interested in seeing that, because the first one was so over the top with the first several were so over the top with the blood and, you know, the effects, and, you know, when Ash cuts off his arm, camera tilts up, we don't really see it, we just see the blood spray against his face, the gigantic blood spray against his face.
Yeah.
You know, and then all the humor and everything else that kind of comes from it. I would even like to have seen, you know, look, we're going to make this really real, and then we're going to punctuate it with something that is absolutely ridiculous in terms of its, I don't know, its dark humor, its irony, its something. And that, even that, I would call, I could look beyond the ultra realism and the fact that things are kind of mismatched. If they would have used it to set it up, taking a bigger swing in the other direction.
There's no payoff to her losing her arm.
Yeah,
there's no payoff to losing her arm.
Yeah, there's also, like, it's funny too, and actually there's a good thing in the chat room we'll talk about in just a second. But they, you know, they're like, we're not going to kill anybody. At some point they decide, like, no, we're not going to kill anybody, except they've just killed somebody. Like, they've totally killed Olivia. Like, what? We're not going to kill people. Yes, you are. You just did. Like, he just, like, bludgeoned somebody to death. We're not killing people here. But, like, stuff like that.
Man.
Like, there's none of that. Because there's mountains of blood. And I actually think, like, if you're a gore hound, this movie probably does satisfy. I mean, there's some pretty gross stuff. The girl cutting her face off. You know, all that stuff is super gory.
I got something I got to address. I got something I really have to address. The MacGyver defibrillator is the thing that just made me just spiral into an utter ball of hatred. Because when he starts putting that together, and I'm like, all right, it's about to get fun. You know, I'm thinking, like, we're about to get, that's going to be our token Ash chainsaw, and he's going to run around just, like, electrocuting shit to death. But no, we get just some really cornball, near Spielbergian bullshit about him reviving his sister. It is just so horrible. So horrible. And yeah, it's just like that just like when there is finally a payoff, it's just the payoff of the worst order. It's so bad. That scene made me literally punch a hole in my bathroom door.
Wow. Did you replace your hand with a chainsaw afterwards?
Yeah, that's the only obvious choice. Well, see, it's also like, you know, they brought a nurse up there to do stuff, and he exhibits none. See, like Ash, you kind of get, maybe he's a blue collar, he could be a mechanic. There's nothing in this guy where all of a sudden he becomes MacGyver, and he makes a defibrillator. Like, all this stuff, you're just like, where is this coming from? Why isn't the nurse there to do this? Like, she didn't tell him to. All the way that comes about, I was like, what? Yeah, it's so bad. But we do have a good comment from the chat room. One of our guests says that all the allure and intrigue about the book and the original is left out. And I think I agree because, you know, there's not like, what's that? And they turn it on, and yeah, it's kind of goofy. But in here, they've made all these stupid translations that aren't really translations. They're more like just notes in blood, and each of them more shocking, like chop the motherfucker, and like all this stuff that you just feel is in like bad horror style kind of lyrics, like new metal lyrics. And it's not effective
wrote
either.
like the Necronomicon or something in the movie. It's like, yeah, there's like
so
profanity galore in it. Yeah.
It's so crummy. Like, who wrote that? I kind of like that they tried to like.
Crummy. Crummy. That is a great descriptor.
Oh man, but I kind of do like how they tried to obscure things. Like, that was kind of interesting, where you had to get out the pencil and kind of, you know, scrape. Oh, what was originally there? That was kind of neat. But the translation stuff, where it's blood and like, oh man, and we're supposed to. I don't know if we're supposed to be shocked, but each one more shocking than the last. Like, translation, and you know, they tried to like bring the Necronomicon more. So you have like a scene that happens, and then they show the book. Oh, this is a thing that happened in the book, and you know, it sort of was an interesting idea that just felt. But each one was so ham-fisted that it was.
I don't think the Necronomicon looks as cool as it does in the.
Oh,
no. You know, with the
Definitely
like the,
not.
you know the original one where it looks like it's made out of a face. There's something so much more creepy about that. This is more kind of like a Boris Karloff Frankenstein book, and
well, again,
I mean, I guess
we're going to make it more realistic. You know, like, oh, well, it's skin.
I don't even think it looks so realistic,
together.
though. I think it looks, you know, in terms of realism, it's actually probably about the same. You know, I mean, I buy that this is a book, and I buy that it's bound in skin. It's just that little detail of it that that there's this face on the front of the book. Just, you know, it's a tiny thing, I guess, but it gives it that personality.
Yeah, the book in the movie in the remake looks like it was like bound in Freddy Krueger's foreskin and stitched together. It looks very ordinary to me.
Wow.
You're right. The face is something that they just never. The face is something that you see in the original movie, and every time I see that, I almost wish that they would have done something more with it. And here you have this bold opportunity. This is why you remake movies. You look at the originals and you see opportunities to expand and grow and make it bigger and more wild, and they don't do that here at all.
I will say this. You know, we talked about it what is now weeks ago on the original, and then subsequently on Evil Dead 2, about how people call these zombie movies, and that's really not accurate. I really think that this movie, you know, what I was thinking about today, the terror of possession, to me, actually, this is scarier in theory than a zombie contagion, because this evil force that is present in the Evil Dead mythology could take you any time at once. And that's 1,000 times more frightening to me conceptually than, you know, I have to be bitten, or in case of the Romero films, I have to die and then I'll spring back up. Like, this is like, I could just be mowing the lawn and suddenly I'm possessed by demons and I'm just going to go kill my family with a lawnmower. Like, that's a scary idea. Now, these people, the people who did the screenplay for this, they didn't come up with that. You know, that's present in all of these movies. But that, to me, you know, we're talking about these movies in relation to zombie films, which is something we've talked about over the course of doing all of these. That is a real major difference, and that is why these are not zombies.
You know, also one thing they did, talking about that, once in both Evil Dead 1 and 2, you had things, and they did that a little bit at the beginning. And, huge, it's running after them. You don't know what that is. And so you kind of see it at the end of Evil Dead 2, it's, the big face thing. But throughout the movie, they just kind of run through the woods with that crazy noise. Here, it does it at the beginning, and when they're like doing stuff, but then it becomes the girl, which isn't nearly as scary as just something. We see her and she crackles and she does crazy contortions and, she chases her down. But once you personify it as, oh, by the way, it's the girl they burn up, and, you see her in the woods and you see stuff like that, it's no longer just this force off camera. It wasn't nearly as scary. It was a lot like, Max said, like The Ring. Like you have this thing and you're like, okay, well, that's an entity, but it's, there goes the imagination part of it, because what you have in your head is going to be infinitely more scary than, crazy witch girl with weird eyes who crawls around and, we've seen all the shaking head and do that, all that stuff, like all the contortion stuff. Like by now,
another thing that really
I've seen that a million times.
Yeah, another thing that really differentiates this from the other original series is that the purpose of loved ones being possessed seems to have a purpose of really tormenting the people that are alive. And in this movie, when someone gets possessed, they just go straight up batshit ex-girlfriend homicidal on the people. They're just like, I'm going to scratch your eyes out. They don't say that, but you know what I'm getting at, right? And in the original films, they really use the idea of these people that other people are attached to emotionally to really get under their skin and make them kind of lose their mind. And there's really nothing cerebral to this movie at all. There's really nothing on a deeper level. It's very body horror. It's very, it's very, they're going for the gross outs, but there's not a lot of heart behind it. I think that's why the Evil Dead movies, the original ones, are so interesting, because these things toy with people.
Well, they do a lot to themselves in this movie. Like, more so than other people. They do things to themselves and then go after the kill. And you're totally right, because in the other ones, it's like, oh, I've turned to this demon, and I'm really ugly, and it's really grotesque. But they're there they definitely are in kind of a, maybe not the super long game, but they're in for the long con in some ways, because it's willing to, like, oh, I'm your loved one. Oh, no, I'm not. Rather than like, oh, no, I'm your loved one, instantly kill you, or, shoot nails at you, or do whatever. But it doesn't even matter in this case, too, because even when they pull that, the characters, to me, were so unlikable that I just was like, and even the relationship, see, when your relationship comes out of love, like, you get the impression, like, Ash really loves his girlfriend in both movies. This one, like, the brother and sister kind of hate each other and blame each other. So when it comes about that she's like, oh, I love you, and then turns, it is much more like The Exorcist. Like, it's
here's the point where I'm going to play devil's advocate. While I don't necessarily think that the actors involved quite pull it off, I do think that there is a sort of reality that I can buy into about that strained sibling relationship, because I've certainly had that at different points in my life, and I liked that stuff. I'm not gonna go whole on the hog defending it, but I bought into it. I enjoy it. That's one of the things I actually do enjoy about the movie.
Okay, if it works for you,
if it works for you, I guess I've also seen, my wife watches a lot of, like, trashy ABC Family and CW shows, and I'll catch them from time to time. And it's pretty much any of that stuff is interchangeable with this movie. And so I've seen a lot of that dynamic. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's another one of those.
Well, I have said that I do have a very high tolerance for trashy TV.
There was, more gore than in any of those shows, so I will give them up for that. And in fact, maybe I'll watch more of them with her if there was the promise of maybe one of them was going to cut their face off or something like that. But since that never happened,
the Evil Dead TV show coming soon.
Yeah. Well,
so here's hoping.
We trust, I think, this time around. I hope. I'm so cautiously optimistic. I'm just kind of really curious what the hook and what the draw is going to be.
Here's the question that I've been bouncing around in my head. Because a lot of fans do seem to like this movie, and I more or less like it. But what would be the right way to reintroduce Evil Dead? I mean, I guess this is financially successful, so you could argue from a certain standpoint that they've done that. But obviously, all four people here are dissatisfied to varying degrees. I kind of personally wish that just would have filmed the musical, because at least that would have been extremely different from everything else.
Yeah, I don't know if you could sell that to a producer, but
you never know. You never know.
Yes.
I don't know about a TV show. I mean, somebody on the Facebook said, I think that if it was on a cable network, they could see it working, and I think that's probably the only way. But I mean, how does everybody else feel about, like, what would be the right way to do Evil Dead in the 21st century?
That's a good question.
Well,
Max?
I think that if I were to do it, I think I would have tried to. I wouldn't have tried to repeat it any of their spots. I mean, Raimi's got his spots, and I feel like they took some of his spots, and they tried. I guess you could say they tried to pay homage to him, but in the process, a lot of it just kind of falls flat and doesn't come anywhere near as effective as the original stuff, which is really depressing, because you think that something that was filmed in like '79 would easily be trumped by something that comes out today. You'd hope that we progress down the line. I really think that there just wasn't enough originality. Like, if I were to write an Evil Dead reboot, it wouldn't be in a cabin. It would have completely different characters. But I think I would try to really hold on to the aesthetic. That's one of my main problems with this, is that the Raimi aesthetic isn't there. And I think it kind of needed to be there. I think they should have taken it and maybe really made it their own. I just feel like they took all these other components from other films and just kind of Frankensteined them together, and it just doesn't work for me. Like the elements that they borrow from the Rings imagery, or the possession style that we see Reagan, where she's very very profane and very vulgar. Like I said, yeah, I would have taken the aesthetic and gone in a completely new realm with it.
I agree with that. I think taking the pieces that really make Evil Dead, and it's recombining those elements in a new way that makes it. These are all very familiar elements, right? I mean, it's not just the cabin, right? Cabin could be anything as long as people are isolated, as long as you're giving them the right kind of situation. And you take the humor, you take the gallows humor, you take the irony, you take the blood, you take the situations and twist them and recombine them in a way that make them feel fresh but very, very familiar. And I mean, that truly is an homage without being a direct homage. You really are building on the stuff that and I think we've said it. I know I keep saying that, but I think we've said it. It doesn't have the charm. It doesn't have a lot of the. There was a conspiratorial aspect to it. You could tell that we were being taken on a trip with Raimi on these pictures, and I feel like I was really watching this and watching it from a distance. I wasn't taken along in it. So I think that apart from visual style, which I think is important, and I think it would be. I agree with Max that there is an aesthetic to be. There's some aesthetic I think to be harvested for purposes of a wink towards or a nod towards the original. But I think having a completely reimagined aesthetic to make it stand out, to give it its own particular style, to reinvent the style of what makes it feel fresh, but borrow from the elements that make Evil Dead, and making it into something entirely new. not something that, you just watch from a distance and walk away from, but something you feel like, wow, I just saw something really fresh and awesome, and I want to tell other people about it. I kind of want to see it again because I really hadn't seen that before. I hadn't seen a treatment of that, and I think there's still room for that in this series. I think it could be redone and reimagined.
What I'd really love to see, actually, that I would have really loved to have seen a prequel about how that professor found Necronomicon and how it got to the cabin and what happened to his family. I think that I am typically not a huge fan of prequels because, you see a prequel and you pretty much already know how it's going to go. You know where it's going. But I think that there's enough meat in the suggested idea of how the book wound up where it did to where I kind of want to see that. I want to know how the hell that happened or what the hell happened prior to Ash getting to the cabin.
Oh, that would be, and I have a different take, but what you're saying now as well, like, you could go really, if you really want to mine things, you could have the dynamic between the professor and his wife, and maybe somebody else was brought up there if you just need an extra person, and go really, really like Italian horror on it. And so get more psychological. Maybe her degradation is slower, that kind of stuff. Where you could really, and that would be a way where you could, because so often I see people, they have to make it smell like themselves, right? Well, we're not going to do that. Except they get caught in this trap where they say, I've got to make it smell like myself, but nobody is going to watch that because they want to see, in this case, a chainsaw and a thing in the woods and a car chase and a tree rape. They want to see all these things, right? and so they've said, like, we're going to make it gritty, so I can't. So you get something in the middle, and I think that's the problem. You get. I always say that if you mix enough colors together, you're always going to get brown, and that's what they're trying to do. That's what you're always going to get is brown, no matter what. I have to have this, and I have to have that color, and that color, and that color. It's always going to turn out brown. And so what you've got is this thing that can be neither original nor have the same beats. You could set it, have the book have it wash away. Maybe it's set in, I don't know, wastelands of Detroit, in something really bad. You don't have to have a chainsaw. You can have somebody up the ante. What if it's a circular saw this time? So it has the same idea, but now you're like, oh, dude, this time it's this, or this time it's that. So you can have those beats and have it still be your thing without, and I've seen like some of the best remakes have that, or homages where you're like, oh, that's kind of cool because they've upped it there or whatever. They've taken what I like and now it's like something cooler. I've seen where they try too hard on that as well. But, why do the exercise if you're also going to miss it? It's like they have all the beats, but it missed all the stuff that makes an Evil Dead movie an Evil Dead movie. And it's just so, I think that's the disconnect. I think it's what, you're talking about, Adam, where I felt like I was, I watched a thing that had a bunch of Evil Dead stuff in it, but I didn't watch an Evil Dead movie at all. It just felt very like, yep, there's a chainsaw. Oh, look, it possessed somebody. There's the basement. Oh, man, the basement is pretty scary and gnarly. There's some gross out, like, oh, wow, that face thing looked crazy, or the scalding looked terrible. And they, people did some really awesome effects. And there's actually some good cinematography in everything. But when you put it all together, you not only, literally have brown because they just desaturate everything, but figuratively you've got that as well. And that just, I don't know. I think I would have liked kind of more of an Italian horror prequel, or like Matt said again, I'm having, in another city or another town, or what if this washed down to the local town and somebody found it? That would be crazy, because then you're up in the ante with something, and that can be your own with all the beats. Have a mechanic do Ash things because he knows how to, put stuff together. I don't know. But aping it just feels like a weird exercise more than a movie.
I agree.
I think one of the things having just watched Army of Darkness back to back with this, and I said it last week, I think one of the reasons why I feel like there's this sort of, this feels very small to me, because what Army of Darkness does is it opens this universe up a lot more in scope, even though that was a cheaper movie than this. It's also a bigger movie in a lot of ways. And I think going back to the cabin, it feels much more confined. And I think what they could possibly do with a TV show is some of the stuff that you guys are talking about, where they could take the Necronomicon and expand on this mythology and put it in different settings and things like that. Because, that's I think what me is, the guy that has just watched all three original movies in 3 weeks in a row. That's what I'm wanting to see, and that's what I'm hoping they'll do if they do actually follow suit with that. Like like I said, there's just this sort of, it's not just that it feels generic. I think I just hit the nail on the head. This movie feels very small and confined, but not in like a claustrophobic way, but just like confined within its ideas. I mean, there's some mythology beats that I really like that they bring on back from the original films, which, I think I even said this earlier. I like the idea that within this universe, like if you're going to face this evil, you have to almost ritualistically sacrifice a bit of yourself, and that's how you go on. I like that. I like that stuff, and that stuff works well enough for me. And the gore definitely, like I do like the gore in this movie. I will say I like the second time I watched this, I was watching it with a group of friends, and I remember one of my buddies, and I don't even remember who, but a grown man say, "This is a gross movie," and as a horror film, I just kind of like that it is a gross movie, and that it'll gross out a grown man. So I will admit that, like I do like that about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great, hands down, there's some great gore in it. That's why I've said, like I said before, like I think Gorehounds, like I think it's got a lot going for it in that. And I like the sacrifice thing too. Actually, that kind of ended up in, we had something, not exactly that, but we had another pitch that Jason and I were doing, another comic that had some real stakes in that. And I think there are real stakes. If you can get past it, it's kind of not, to me personally, didn't feel that their relationship, I couldn't care. But the fact that, hey, you got to bury your sister, that's some real stakes. I have to give it up. That is pretty shocking and rough, right? Like, especially they're estranged. So the first time they've seen each other in forever, this dude has to bury his sister alive, no less. That's pretty. There's definitely some meat there. I agree, but yeah,
it's just a kernel.
I guess
it's not whole. One thing I do want to mention before I forget, one thing that really bothered me also about this movie is that I think when someone is possessed and they put themselves through a certain amount of punishment, I don't think that they should come out unscathed. You saw Mia go through a lot. She is scalded beyond recognition almost. She cuts her tongue down the middle. She almost, she has a forked tongue. But when the thing leaves her body, she just kind of bounces back to normal and she's fine. That's another thing. I wish that her character had kind of gone through a little more other than just what she wound up with, just the arm missing or whatever, which was kind of pointless and didn't really have a payoff. But yeah,
right.
I felt like everything that Mia had been through felt entirely pointless because she came out relatively unscathed.
My problem with Mia suddenly becoming the hero, I actually like her a lot in that brief bit where she just kind of becomes Bruce Campbell and she's pretty good at spouting off the sort of Bruce Campbell-esque dialogue. I don't feel like they quite earned the swap around of the main characters, though. Like, I didn't, because she was possessed for the majority of the movie. You know, you don't really get much of a sense of her character other than that she's somebody with a troubled past, and she has, you know, you got a bunch of dialogue about her history. And, you know, it does feel like that there's a character there that you could work with, and I guess if they do sequels or whatever, you might be able to expand on that. But, you know, you've been following her brother for the majority of the movie, so, like, that's, you know, it's not like Evil Dead 2 where you or even the original Evil Dead where you have these characters that, you know, you do sort of think could take over as the hero of the movie, and, you know, you'll buy into that. But, you know,
I hate Mia all through this movie.
I hate her. I can't say that I can't say that. There's not enough of her there to hate. There's not enough of her there to hate her.
She's a melodramatic junkie. I've known enough junkies in my life to know that I don't like junkies, and she is such a whiny little prick. Just like, no matter what she's gone through, her character is like, she should be at home cutting herself and writing on LiveJournal. She's very ordinary, and I think that you get enough of her. I don't think there's a single character, save for the dog, that I like in this movie. Like, the dog, when the dog gets hurt, man, I'm upset. Because the dog is it's an innocent animal. You feel bad for animals. I don't feel bad for Mia here, because, like I said, she comes off as a pushy, whiny, melodramatic, junkie teenager. And that's just not a character that I identify with or like in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And like you said, fair enough. Like, fair enough.
As well.
Fair enough. I don't really feel strongly enough about her to say that I hate her in the first part of the movie, because I just don't think there's enough. You know, she's possessed through the vast majority of the movie. Like, personally, I do think it would have been interesting, you know, you don't lose kind of the iconic visual, which of like a female ghoul kind of popping in and out of the basement, which, you know, of course they want to recreate. But it would have been a little bit more interesting if her brother had been the one that had been possessed. Like, that would have been a nice little change, like a flip that they could have done on the original films. And I would have appreciated it, because, I mean, none of these characters are very broadly drawn. There isn't really a whole lot to it. You know, the nerdy guy that actually reads the book is probably the most fully realized character, and even there's not a whole lot.
He's the dumbest too. He's a dumbass.
He is a dumbass. Although I feel a certain amount of empathy for him, because it looks exactly like my friend Hunter. Like, he's a dead ringer.
You know what might have actually made me like this movie just a little bit more is if you had seen the characters that you see in the prologue. The redneck characters. You've got your burn-up looking teenage Jason character, and you've got the doctor, and exactly who is this doctor? We never really find out. The only thing that prevents me from liking that first little bit, which I think might be just one of the strongest parts of the movie, is that you don't get any more out of it. It happens and then it's gone, and it's like, these people are probably obviously local. And who is this doctor? And if the book is so bad, how come nobody's watching it? You know, it's just, I've got, you know, if this thing is so bad, should somebody be watching this thing? I mean, when you lock up a prisoner, you watch the prisoner. That really bugs me.
Yeah, well, even the guy reading the book is supposed to be like, oh, well, he knows something about the occult. But he never really even uses that, other than accidentally waking up the book, other than being curious. Then he's not a really good problem solver as far as, like,
dude, the incantations allowed. That's like, if you've ever, like, seen a horror film or listened to a heavy metal record, you know you don't read lyrics and incantations and shit aloud. In the reality that I live in, you don't do that. And that just drives me nuts.
I've told the story multiple times on here. You know, I had a guy give me a spell and tell me if I needed to use it to burn that. Did I? No. You know why? I've seen enough horror movies. You know, I don't know what that spell's going to do. And I'm not taking the chance. Like, yeah, maybe that's superstitious, but why do that even?
Better safe than sorry, man.
Yeah.
Totally.
No,
totally.
I'm not going to burn that. Like, I don't know you. It wasn't like somebody I knew and trusted you was like, hey, here's this, like, you know, bag of things or a file of something or, you know, spread this around your house to keep out ghosts. This was a dude at a show with, like, a shaved head and spider tattoos on his head telling me if I need something, here's some runes to burn that. No.
Never take advice from that guy.
No. That's not, I don't know that guy. I'm not going to do that. So, you know, I totally agree with you.
I will say that there is one thing that I actually felt was effective that I actually did like. So, you know, I don't come off as just a complete like negative grandpa here. I really did like the visual of the raining blood. I really enjoyed that toward the end, and I really enjoyed Mia climbing through the passage as the entity was shoving the machete through the walls. I thought that was very effective. But other than that, fuck everything else. Fuck everything else except for those two things.
Here's a question. Did that happen was that being filmed at the same time as The Raid or not? Because I was like, wait, where did I see? Oh, huh.
Well, they also.
That's very People Under the Stairs too. You know, I mean, it kind of reminded me of Roach to some degree. Roach in the walls, avoiding gunshots. You know, it's very reminiscent to me of that. But yeah. You know,
and that was pretty. I mean, that was scary. Like
there's a similar beat in the Friday the 13th remake too. You know, it's. I mean, it is effective here. I'm not going to say that it's not, but I mean, it is something we have seen before. The rain, the blood rain, though, it's interesting that you bring that up because that is something that's not in any. It's not an Evil Dead. It's not an Evil Dead 2. It's not an Army of Darkness. It's something they bring
like
here.
A prophecy. It's very biblical.
It's very biblical.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
I'm totally on board with you there. Like
that's another thing. I feel like there was a lot of weird satanic connotation, and that's something that I think this film, it feels like very like it came from the mind of someone who is very influenced by Judeo-Christian, like word is eluding me right now, but it's someone who's very much influenced by Christianity, Christian myth, and all that. And the Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, to me always felt like it was something that was much older than any religion. It felt like such a thing unto itself, like beyond anything that we could comprehend. It's something that would predate even Christianity. And this feels like it's very much like the devil's coming to get you, you know, and that's hokey to me.
I will agree. And you know, because the original was Sumerian. And so that also gave them the cool thing and why they kind of did that, I'm sure, is that it doesn't feel like, you know, it doesn't feel like Exorcist. It doesn't feel like The Omen. It feels like, hey, it could be anything because I think the number of people who know anything Sumerian is probably far less than people who kind of feel like they know about demons and angels, you know, and what satanic things are. And I think this definitely, like a lot of the imagery even in the book felt more like that and less like some weird crazy crap.
But that's pandering though. That's why I call it's one of the many details that I think that makes it feel like it just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like they tried hard enough. I think that you should never underestimate your audience. I think that that's primarily why I love foreign horror films. Like we talk about how there is kind of this weird dry period in American horror, and I think it's very exclusive to us because I still see great horror films coming out all over the world. But a lot of the horror films that I see abroad, they don't have to hit the audience over the head with everything every 5 minutes. That's another thing that I really, really despise about this movie. It really, really sticks its dick in your face and waggles it when he goes down to the basement and he's standing by the burnt post and they have to cut in that shot of that girl burning on that post because they think their audience is too goddamn stupid to make the connection. You know what, man? Fuck you. If I ever meet the director who did this just for that shot, I'm going to punch him in the throat so hard. makes me irate because seriously, everybody should be offended by this. People should feel offended that people think that you're that stupid that you couldn't make that connection. You should be.
Max.
Yes, sir.
I think you should maybe not sugarcoat it so much.
I try.
I do think that's the first time we've had a physical threat on the show. This is purely.
This is all me. This reflects no one else on the show's opinion. This is purely me being hateful. And you know what? But it's insulting.
Sometimes the stuff needs to. If it creates a visceral reaction, that sometimes it moves you one way or another, just not in the direction everyone thinks. In this case,
right,
to violent.
Speaking of which, we're kind of getting past. Sorry, we're kind of getting past the usual allotment. So it's probably a good time to wrap it up and give our final thoughts, which I think that was probably a pretty effective one. But
I think that's
why don't you finish out your final thoughts, and then we'll go. So we'll go Max, Adam, Drew, and then I'll close it out, and then we'll do endorsements.
Okay.
Finish it out, Max.
Bottom line, I feel like this has so many flavors. It's like the statement you made about, you mix enough colors together, you're always going to get brown. I feel like this tries to mix so many flavors together that it winds up tasting like absolutely nothing. There's just no originality to it, and I think you could have still paid tribute to, what Raimi did and come to the table with your own ideas instead of just rehashing ones that we're familiar with. It's like looking at multiple generation Xerox copy of something. It's faded and kind of crappy, and a lot of the details and nuances that make the original photos look so good are just gone. And other than that, I'll punctuate it with saying that, this still made me feel violated and violent, just because it's really obvious that they just don't respect their audience. They think that people are stupid, so they have to pepper in, nearly subliminal shots that remind you things that happened earlier. And I think that's just proof of why so many American horror films are garbage now, this one included.
Fair enough. Adam?
I don't know what I can add to that or what, what else we've said. I think that pretty much boils it down. I think the important thing, rather than just, apart from an indictment of the modern American horror genre in terms of cinema, I think really what we're looking at, it may be part of what Max is responding to, and certainly what I'm responding to, and that is really a missed opportunity. I think that there was, this is a different generation that I think could have been turned on to sort of the fun and the kind of misbehavior and entertainment of what Evil Dead represented as a franchise. Even though this is a full-on studio picture, and it was profitable, so that's fine. But I think it could have been so much more, and probably should have been. I think we're probably responding to it very negatively, also because it's almost like not only is it dishonoring, I guess, our expectations certainly and our intelligence, but it's also dishonoring a franchise that we hold, that we actually respond to and really like. I would like to have seen this be so much more, and that's really what I'm reacting to. It's okay on its own. There are a lot of things I don't care for about it, but my main gripe with it is the fact that it does not seem like an Evil Dead picture, and it does not seem like a worthy, not just a worthy reimagination of it. It's not a worthy successor. So, and that's really, I think, the crux of it. So, pass.
Fair enough. Drew?
Like I said, this is. I don't know how often I'm going to go back and rewatch this movie. If somebody were to throw it on, if I were over at somebody else's house and hanging out, I wouldn't piss and moan or anything about that. But certainly after watching the original three, who have, all of those movies, for their merits and their faults, have so much personality and just have this distinct quality to them. And this movie just is lacking in that. I mean, you know, it's okay. You know, like I don't hate it. You know, I'm not going to write any love letters, and it's after watching the original trilogy, I certainly like it a lot less than the first time I watched it, when it had been a while since I even had watched like Army of Darkness. You know, if you watch this next to one of the Sam Raimi movies, you're gonna certainly like this movie a lot less, because it pales in comparison, because it's just not as artful. You know, he was just talking about the editing tricks that they throw in to remind you of something that just happened, and that's one of the reasons why I said it has a TV movie quality to it. Like, that stuff is very TV movie to me, and it's like I said, it's just okay. You know, the people who are slathering all this praise on it, they're going a little overboard, in my opinion. I mean, like what you like. I'm not telling you not to like it. If you enjoy something, I've never been in one to piss on somebody's Necronomicon, but it's just okay.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I'm kind of perhaps closer to Max and Adam, and less so. Like, I do agree. I mean, I think there's some cool bits for a horror movie. It's definitely, you know, bigger budget. It's got a lot of crazy gore. The effects people, you know, really did a good job. There's a little bit of reliance on CG that I think could have probably been done with practical, perhaps. And but overall, it just really falls flat. Seeing it the second time, I felt to myself like it was really joyless. I know that, you know, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. A lot of times, if you're trying to remake something, like, how much do you hold on to? How much do you want to give the fans, you know, fan service? And then how much do you also want to, you know, forge out on your own? It's not a very good position to be in. But at the end of the day, it just didn't feel like an Evil Dead movie, or what I wanted an Evil Dead movie to be. And that kind of just it sours me some. I didn't like the characters. It just doesn't really work for me. And again, I harken back to, like, I'm wondering, am I, you know, with all the people praising it, am I in the minority? Is this the new cinema? Because we've certainly seen these kind of remakes happen, you know, time and time again. There's, you know, that seems to be where we're headed. And man, I will probably watch more foreign horror if this is what we're going to get. Like, this is the new thing. I don't know if I'm in it for that. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a grandpa too about that. But it doesn't. I want to see less cynicism and more just going for broke. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just feel like there's so much cynicism and darkness and the muted color palette and all that. That seems to be where we're at now, and I kind of want to see somebody break that trend, which is actually the Evil Dead kind of did. You know, there was a bunch of slasher films, and then this one had a bunch of people go up into a cabin in the woods, and crazy business happened. You know, because that's what they could shoot. So somebody make that idea with doing something different that the Evil Dead 1 and 2 did, especially, and do that to new horror. So there you go, people. Go out and do that. Then we'll be able to review that on this thing and be happy. So let's do endorsement. I don't really have anything this week, but let's go Drew, Adam, then Max, and then we'll close it out.
Well, I stumbled across, I've been watching a lot of documentaries on Netflix because I've gotten bored with my usual diet of genre films and trashy TV, and so I've wandered into the documentary section, and I found a nice little documentary called Drew, the Man Behind the Poster, which is about Drew Struzan. And even if you don't know who that is, you are familiar with his work because he's the guy that did all the Back to the Future movie posters. He's done the vast majority of the Star Wars posters. E.T., all of the Indiana Jones movies, and countless other movies he was, for a good 20 to 30 year period, this was like the guy for movie posters. And I really do feel like, I love his artwork. There's always been something about it that I really respond to. But aside from that, I often talk about how I feel like movie posters are kind of a lost and dying art. And this documentary really punctuates that, about how this is unfortunately a dying business, because this guy is the Norman Rockwell of movie posters. This guy is the Da Vinci of movie posters, and he's having a harder and harder time getting work. So it's on Netflix right now. If you get a chance to go on there and check it out, I highly recommend it. It was fun. It was informative. It was very cool.
I wanted to somehow scrape together the money to have him do an album cover. I know he doesn't really do that, but I would totally just be like, if I had money, I would just throw it at him until he said, okay, I don't know whenever that would be, but I would love to do that.
He actually got to start doing album covers. In fact, I never knew this, but he did the cover for Welcome to My Nightmare.
Oh, yeah. That was really cool. So, yeah, that is a good documentary. So, Adam?
I wish I had something to endorse this week. I'm watching The Strain. I'm wanting to like it. I don't exactly know why, but I felt like I should. I don't know. I'm not there yet, so I don't really have an endorsement.
Okie dokie. Max? Anything this week?
Adam can kind of bite on mine because it's a last-minute endorsement that's kind of based on some of his comments, and I would like to endorse a TV movie that feels more like an Evil Dead movie than the Evil Dead remake did, and that is Bill Norton's Gargoyles from 1972. I absolutely love this movie. This movie is it's dripping in atmosphere. There are things about it that I think might have even influenced Evil Dead, such as the prologue that's got the voiceover. It's very similar to the voiceover that you get in Evil Dead 2, and it has phenomenal performances by Cornel Wilde and Bernie Casey. Bernie Casey is like one of the most underrated actors I've ever seen. He's amazing. I always get this title wrong, but Dr. Jekyll and Mr. White he's in, which is oftentimes kind of written off as this kind of corny, pulpy movie, but he delivers a tour de force performance in that film, and he is alive in this as the gargoyle. But if you've never seen it, it's about some paleontologists that go to a roadside attraction, and this guy claims that he has this primordial demonic creature's bones in I believe his workshop, and this winds up touching off a series of events where these primeval godlike creatures, which are gargoyles, climb out of caves from inside the earth and do some damage. And this also ties into a comment that I'd love to make. I always felt that there was a lot of maybe a lot of Lovecraft in a lot of the Evil Dead films. And I hope that someday, if ever there is a big-budget Cthulhu film, I'd love to see Raimi be the guy that tackles that.
Wow. That'd be interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. But Garth, has anybody seen this movie?
I have.
I've seen it a long time ago. It's fun.
Yeah. I when I was a kid, I saw it on I believe TBS, and it annoyed the hell out of my art teacher for weeks and weeks, because all I wanted to do was make gargoyles out of clay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Spend your money on the Gargoyles DVD rather than the Evil Dead remake DVD if you feel so inclined. It has such vibrant spirit to it, and it has a darkness to it that's just really addicting and compelling, and what makes horror films so good. And it's a TV movie that never really goes over the top, but it still manages to provide you with a genuine tension. That's another thing about that movie. I don't really care how overboard it goes or how gory it got. It has no vibe. It has no soul. It's not haunted. It's roadkill, But there's still great movies out there that maybe more people need to see.
Wow. Cool. Yeah, that is a fun movie. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. That wraps us up. We might have a surprise movie, a surprise reprieve of Raimi-less next week, and we'll announce the lineup and everything. But this has been really, really fun. Thanks for being part of it, Max and Adam, part of this retrospective. And it's been really, really cool. I've enjoyed it a lot. I think this worked really well. And we'll hopefully have everybody back. Again, check out Facebook and tell people about the show. And, we're on iTunes. We're on all of it.
Argue with us
anytime.
Argue with us online. We like it when you argue with us.
Yeah. Don't be a jerk, but we love a spirited discussion, as you can tell from especially this particular last couple episodes. So it's really good. Thanks again, and we will see you guys next week, everybody. Thanks for Darren and a couple of guests for logging in as well. Feel free, anybody, to pass on that. You can chat with us while we're doing the show on TalkShoe, and we'll mention some stuff if we can about what you're talking about. So we hope to get more and more interactive as we continue. So cool. Well, take care, and everybody.
Thanks for Tony for hosting these. By the way, round of applause to Tony for taking over hosting duties from Jason the last 4 weeks.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been cool. It's been a little daunting taking over for Jason because he does such a good job, but I'm glad everybody has seemed to enjoy it, and I didn't let people down.
Not at all.
Thanks for having us.
You've been groovy.
Awesome. Well, take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye,
guys. Bye, guys.